The old janitor was mocked for his age, but when the company was sold, he revealed he was the true CEO disguised. The air in the Blackwood Enterprises boardroom was thick, heavy with a palpable tension, a peculiar mixture of anticipation and barely concealed greed that seemed to cling to the polished surfaces. Sunlight, usually a welcome guest, seemed to filter through the grand, arching windows with a cynical glare, casting long, accusing shadows across the gleaming mahogany table and the faces gathered around it. Marcus Thorne, impeccably dressed in a suit that whispered of bespoke tailoring and cost more than some people's annual salaries, leaned back in his plush leather chair, a self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips, a silent declaration of victory. Beside him, Brianna Sterling, her posture as sharp and unyielding as the razor-thin lapels of her designer suit, eyed the stack of legal documents before her with an almost predatory satisfaction, her gaze calculating, devoid of warmth. This was it. The culmination of their elaborate, deceitful plan, years in the making, now moments from being finalized. The sale of Blackwood Enterprises, the empire built by his own hands, was poised on the precipice of a grotesque transformation, a legacy about to be cannibalized. A figure shuffled quietly in the corner, a wizened old man with a mop and bucket, diligently wiping a persistent smudge from the pristine marble floor, seemingly an insignificant speck in the grand tableau. Elias Vance, the company's oldest and most unassuming janitor, appeared entirely oblivious to the momentous occasion unfolding around him, his movements slow, deliberate, almost meditative. Marcus, his eyes darting across the room, noticed the old man's presence, and a soft chuckle, dismissive and carrying just enough to be heard, escaped him. "Elias, could you try to be a bit quicker with that mop? We wouldn't want you to miss the biggest moment in this company's history, would we?" His tone dripped with condescension, an insincere warmth that barely masked the deep-seated contempt beneath. Brianna offered a cold, mirthless smile, her eyes darting between the old janitor, a mere inconvenience, and the precious papers that promised their fortune. Elias, without looking up, continued his slow, methodical movements, the rhythmic swish of the mop head against the marble the only sound. But then, an almost imperceptible shift occurred, a subtle tremor in the air that only a deeply observant eye might catch. His back straightened, just a fraction, a barely discernible stiffening that hinted at an underlying strength. His hand, instead of reaching for the mop, slowly pushed the bucket aside with a soft scraping sound. He turned, his gaze, previously downcast, now lifted, piercing and unexpectedly sharp, no longer the vacant stare of a man lost in menial tasks. A sudden, heavy silence fell, immediate and profound, as his eyes, now alight with an inner fire, met Marcus's, holding them captive. "Actually, Marcus," the old man's voice, usually a raspy whisper that was easily ignored, resonated through the stunned room with an unyielding authority that sent an inexplicable shiver down the spines of those who heard it. "The game is indeed over. But not in the way you seem to believe." He paused, allowing the unexpected weight of his words to settle in the stunned, disbelieving room. Marcus's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of irritation, a vague sense of unease. Brianna's eyes narrowed, her sharp mind sensing an unforeseen disruption, a discordant note in their perfectly orchestrated symphony. "Because you see," Elias continued, his voice gaining strength and clarity with each word, "an unstoppable force, this company, Blackwood Enterprises, isn't being sold. Not in the way you've orchestrated, anyway." He took a deliberate step forward, a transformation beginning to unfold before their very eyes, the stoop of age visibly shedding away. "And the biggest moment in this company's history," he declared, his voice now booming with the undeniable power of a man accustomed to commanding empires, "is about to begin." The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the rapid, frantic beating of hearts, a collective gasp that was never truly exhaled. Marcus's face began to contort in a grotesque mixture of confusion, outrage, and dawning fear. "What in the world are you talking about, Elias? Get back to your cleaning. You're disrupting a multi-billion-dollar acquisition." His voice was a strained mixture of anger and disbelief, a desperate attempt to reassert control over a rapidly unraveling situation. Brianna, though equally bewildered, watched the old man with a dawning suspicion, a cold dread beginning to creep into her usually impenetrable, calculated mind. They had no idea. The true performance, the real unraveling of their deceit, was only just beginning. Silas Blackwood, at 72 years old, had long been a titan. Not merely a man of immense wealth, but a living legend in the cutthroat, unforgiving world of real estate and investment, his name whispered with respect and a touch of awe in financial circles. He had built Blackwood Enterprises from nothing, brick by painstaking brick, through decades of relentless work and unwavering vision, transforming a small, fledgling venture into a sprawling conglomerate that touched every corner of the globe. His name was synonymous with shrewd deals, uncompromising integrity, and a profound, almost paternal, care for the company's long-standing employees, those loyal individuals who had dedicated their lives to his vision. Yet, for all his monumental success, a deep-seated disillusionment had begun to fester within him, slowly, inexorably, like an insidious disease, eroding his peace of mind. His empire, once a proud reflection of his core values, now seemed to be succumbing to the very forces he had always fought against, unchecked avarice and a chilling lack of empathy. He had meticulously groomed successors, hand-picked executives he genuinely believed shared his vision, particularly his grandnephew, Marcus Thorne, whom he had always envisioned as his heir apparent, the torchbearer of his legacy. Marcus possessed a certain aggressive ambition, a hunger for success that Silas had once mistaken for a commendable drive, a necessary fire in the belly. But over the past few years, a disturbing transformation had occurred, slowly twisting the young man's character. Marcus's ambition had curdled into unbridled greed, his drive replaced by a callous disregard for anything beyond personal gain, a predatory hunger. He had watched, a silent observer from his opulent, soundproof office, as Marcus, aided and abetted by the ruthlessly efficient and equally cold Brianna Sterling, had begun to systematically dismantle the very ethos upon which Blackwood Enterprises had been founded. Meetings, once vibrant exchanges of innovative ideas and collaborative strategies, became showcases for ruthless cost-cutting measures that invariably targeted the most vulnerable employees. The old-timers, the loyal stalwarts who had dedicated their lives to Blackwood, were viewed not as invaluable assets, but as liabilities, their hard-earned pensions and benefits seen as unnecessary expenditures, dead weight to be shed. Silas would listen, his heart aching with a profound sense of betrayal, as Marcus eloquently articulated plans for modernization that were thinly veiled excuses for mass layoffs and the cynical liquidation of less profitable, yet historically significant, divisions that had once been the very soul of the company. Brianna, with her sharp intellect and even sharper tongue, would flawlessly present the accompanying financial projections, her cold logic making the heartless decisions seem like unavoidable business necessities, a cruel inevitability. The final straw had come during a private board meeting, one Silas had observed remotely, unseen, his presence unknown to the eager participants. Marcus had, with a casual, dismissive wave of his hand, scoffed at the entire concept of employee loyalty, ridiculing the idea of emotional attachments to a balance sheet. Honestly, Uncle Silas, he had declared, completely oblivious to the old man's remote presence, his voice dripping with condescension, is simply too sentimental. This isn't a charity, it's a business. We need to be lean, mean, and utterly ruthless to compete in today's market. Sentimentality is a weakness we cannot afford. Brianna had nodded in immediate agreement, her lips twisting into a thin, approving line, adding, and those who cannot keep up, or whose experience outweighs their current utility, must be streamlined. It's simply good business sense, Marcus. Silas had felt a cold dread settle in his stomach, heavier than any physical ailment. The company he had painstakingly built, his life's work, was being warped into something unrecognizable, something he despised with every fiber of his being. Marcus and Brianna were not just managing assets, they were commodifying human lives, reducing decades of dedication to mere numbers on a spreadsheet. It was then, in that moment of profound disappointment and chilling clarity, that Silas Blackwood conceived his audacious plan. He needed to see the unvarnished truth, to witness the true character of those he had entrusted with his priceless legacy, unencumbered by the deference his name commanded. He needed to see their actions when they believed no one of consequence was truly watching. And what better vantage point, he reasoned, than from the very bottom, completely invisible to their arrogant gaze. The thought formed, initially as a wild idea, then hardening into an ironclad resolve. The idea of going undercover as a janitor, an Elias Vance, was born from a desperate desire for complete anonymity, a role so overlooked, so beneath the notice of the powerful, that it would render him utterly invisible to the avarice-filled eyes of his executives. He meticulously planned every single detail, leaving nothing to chance: the faded, ill-fitting uniform, subtly worn at the elbows and knees, the slight, almost imperceptible stoop he would introduce into his posture, mimicking the cumulative weight of years of physical labor, the subtle tremor he would induce into his hands, as if from age or fatigue, the quiet, almost subservient demeanor, a stark contrast to his usual commanding presence. He even altered his voice, making it softer, raspier, thick with the sound of years and disuse. His vast network of contacts, loyal to him alone and stretching across industries, helped him set up a perfectly convincing false identity, complete with a fabricated background story, a retired widower seeking light work, and a humble, nondescript apartment far from his usual opulent residences. He would enter Blackwood Enterprises not through the gleaming executive entrance, but through the service one, an unknown, elderly man seeking a simple, dignified job to pass his twilight years. His goal was clear, sharp as a newly honed blade: to observe, to listen, to truly understand the moral fabric of his company's current leadership. He would watch Marcus and Brianna, of course, their every move, every whispered conversation. But he would also seek out those who still embodied the true Blackwood ethos, the integrity, the compassion, the genuine commitment to the company's well-being over personal gain. Only then, armed with the unvarnished truth, the raw, unfiltered reality, would he make his critical decision about the future of Blackwood Enterprises. The stage was set, the disguise perfected down to the smallest detail, and the unsuspecting players, particularly Marcus and Brianna, were about to reveal their true, ugly selves. Life as Elias Vance was a stark, almost brutal contrast to the gilded existence of Silas Blackwood. The physical demands were surprising, a constant, dull ache in muscles long accustomed to comfort and ease. His 72-year-old body, though generally well-maintained, protested the long hours of stooping, mopping, sweeping, and the unexpected strain of lifting heavy waste bins. His hands, once accustomed to signing multi-million-dollar contracts with a flourish, now grew calloused and roughened from scrubbing bathroom tiles and pushing heavy carts. Yet, amidst the discomfort, the anonymity was liberating, a strange, powerful cloak that allowed him to move through the corporate labyrinth unseen, unheard, a phantom observer in his very own empire. The shift from revered leader to ignored janitor was a humbling, eye-opening experience that stripped away all pretenses. He learned the rhythms of the building, the hushed whispers in the corridors just before lunch, the hurried footsteps before critical deadlines, the sudden bursts of laughter from the sales department. And he observed. Oh, how he observed! Every glance, every gesture, every overheard snippet of conversation became a piece of the intricate puzzle he was assembling. He noticed the casual wastefulness in the executive offices, half-eaten gourmet sandwiches tossed, lights left on in empty rooms. He saw the subtle deference shown to those in power and the equally subtle contempt shown to those in service. The world looked entirely different from this new, lower vantage point. Marcus Thorne, his grandnephew, was a symphony of arrogance and self-indulgence, each note a grating discord to Silas's ears. Elias would often find him in his lavish office, feet propped carelessly on his polished desk, engaged in loud, boisterous phone calls that invariably revolved around his latest expensive purchase, a rare sports car, a new designer watch, or a new, exclusive club membership he was vying for. Marcus's disdain for Elias, the old janitor, was a constant, low hum in the background of their interactions, a palpable current of disrespect. He was simply not worth seeing. One particularly grueling afternoon, Elias was struggling to move a heavy filing cabinet, a task far beyond the typical duties of a janitor, but one he had quietly undertaken to test the limits of his disguise. Marcus strolled by, a designer coffee cup in hand, flanked by two junior executives eager to impress him with their sycophantic laughter. He paused, watching Elias strain, a cruel glint in his eye. "Having trouble, old-timer?" Marcus asked, his voice dripping with mock concern that barely concealed his amusement. "Perhaps you should stick to something lighter, like dusting. Though, I suppose your hands might be too shaky for that, eh?" He chuckled, a harsh, grating sound, and his entourage, sensing their cue, joined in, their laughter echoing hollowly in the quiet hallway. Marcus didn't offer to help, nor did he instruct his young, strong executives to do so. He simply watched, enjoying Elias's struggle, before walking away, leaving a trail of expensive cologne and profound contempt in his wake. The slight tremor Silas had feigned in his hands now felt agonizingly real, a physical manifestation of his emotional pain. Another time, Elias was meticulously cleaning the executive washroom, a veritable shrine to marble and chrome, polished to a blinding sheen. Marcus entered, talking loudly on his phone, oblivious to Elias's presence in a stall, diligently scrubbing. "Honestly, Uncle Silas's old policies are a joke. Loyalty? Compassion? This isn't a kindergarten, it's a global corporation. Once this sale goes through, Brianna and I are slashing at least 20% of the dead weight. Anyone over 50, anyone with a legacy pension plan, poof. Gone. We'll bring in fresh blood, cheaper, hungrier. They won't ask for ridiculous benefits or demand silly things like job security." Elias's heart clenched, a cold fury bubbling beneath his placid exterior, a rage he had to keep carefully hidden. He had built this company on the backs of those very loyal employees Marcus so casually dismissed, their lives dedicated to his vision. The injustice burned. Brianna Sterling, if anything, was even more chilling in her calculated cruelty. She rarely engaged with Elias directly, preferring to treat him as an invisible fixture, a mere piece of office furniture, beneath her notice. Yet, her actions spoke volumes, each one a stark revelation of her character. Elias would often overhear her in hushed, conspiratorial conversations with Marcus, meticulously planning the company's dissolution, outlining the terms of the sale that would enrich them beyond their wildest dreams, while simultaneously laying the groundwork for the mass layoffs. He heard them discuss how to manipulate the stock prices, how to hide certain assets from scrutiny, how to ensure their golden parachutes were lined with platinum, all at the expense of the company's long-term health and the lives of its devoted employees. The callousness was breathtaking. One evening, Elias was cleaning Marcus's office after hours, the building largely empty save for a few late workers. Marcus and Brianna were still there, poring over documents, their voices low and conspiratorial, believing themselves to be utterly alone. "The final valuation is in," Brianna murmured, a glint of triumph in her cold eye. "It's even more than we anticipated. Once we push through the restructuring, our personal cut will be astronomical. Silas will be furious, of course, but what's he going to do? He's old, out of touch. He'll never see it coming, too busy living in the past." Marcus laughed, a guttural sound of pure, unadulterated triumph. "He's probably too busy knitting, or something equally geriatric. He wouldn't know a smart play if it slapped him in his face. This company needed a real leader, someone willing to make the tough decisions, not coddle employees like children. He built it, but he can't run it in the modern age." Elias, hidden behind a tall bookshelf, meticulously dusting, felt a surge of cold, grim satisfaction. They were confirming his very worst suspicions, laying bare their unadulterated avarice for him to witness firsthand. Every mocking word, every cruel glance, every dismissive gesture from Marcus and Brianna only solidified Silas's conviction that his initial judgment of them, his faith in their character, had been catastrophically, tragically wrong. He painstakingly documented these conversations, using a tiny, hidden recorder, and later transcribed them, building an irrefutable case. But amidst the pervasive cynicism, a different light occasionally broke through the gloom, a beacon of hope in the moral decay. Lena Petrov, a junior analyst in the Mergers and Acquisitions department, was a stark, refreshing contrast to the avarice and cold ambition that permeated the executive floors. She was young, perhaps in her late 20s, with bright, intelligent eyes that still held a spark of idealism, untarnished by corporate cynicism. Elias first noticed her not for any grand gesture, but for the simple, remarkably rare courtesy she extended. She would always offer a polite, "Good morning, Elias," a simple gesture that, remarkably, was extended by very few others, most treating him as though he were invisible. One afternoon, Elias was struggling with a jammed paper shredder in a rarely used corner office, a frustratingly stubborn machine that refused to cooperate, its gears grinding uselessly. Lena, walking by with a stack of files for a different department, paused. She didn't have to, no one else would have. "Need a hand with that, Elias?" she asked, her voice genuinely kind, devoid of any condescension. Before he could protest or offer a polite refusal, she knelt beside him, her brow furrowed in concentration, her expensive suit no deterrent. She worked patiently, her nimble fingers troubleshooting the mechanism, carefully dislodging the stubborn paper, and within minutes, the shredder hummed back to life with a satisfying whir. "There you go," she smiled, wiping a smudge of grease from her hand with a tissue. "Sometimes it just needs a gentle touch, a bit of patience." Elias, genuinely surprised by her unsolicited help and quiet competence, mumbled his thanks, a warmth spreading through him. Her simple act of kindness stood in stark opposition to Marcus's callousness, a stark reminder of the humanity he sought. On another occasion, Lena was working late, long after most had left the building, the fluorescent lights humming overhead in the quiet office. Elias was emptying wastebaskets in her cubicle, the only sounds the rustle of paper and the soft clinking of his keys. She looked tired, her shoulders slumped, her usually bright eyes shadowed. "Rough day, Lena?" he asked, a rare moment where he initiated conversation, feeling a genuine concern for her. She sighed, running a weary hand through her hair. "Just, a lot of changes happening. It's hard to see some of the older staff go. Mr. Henderson from accounting, Mrs. Davies from HR. They've been here forever, you know. It feels wrong, like we're discarding history." Her voice was laced with genuine sorrow, a depth of empathy that touched Silas profoundly, confirming his growing hope. She wasn't complaining about her own workload, her own precarious position as a junior analyst. She was lamenting the fate of others, feeling their pain. "I just wish we could find a way to keep everyone, to value their experience. Blackwood Enterprises has always been about its people, hasn't it?" She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting a quiet despair, seeking a shared understanding. "But I guess that's just how big business works now, right? Just numbers." Elias simply nodded, his heart swelling with a mix of relief and renewed hope. Here was the true spirit of Blackwood Enterprises, shining through in an unexpected place, a quiet defiance against the prevailing cynicism. Lena, despite her own struggles, her own precarious position as a junior analyst in a company undergoing a hostile takeover, still held on to the values that Marcus and Brianna so vehemently rejected, values Silas cherished above all else. He made a mental note of her name, etching it into his memory as a beacon. As the days turned into weeks, the evidence mounted, Elias's observations solidifying his grim resolve. Marcus and Brianna were beyond redemption, their hearts cold, their motives purely selfish. They saw Blackwood Enterprises not as a legacy to be cherished, but as a carcass to be picked clean, a personal piggy bank. Lena, on the other hand, represented everything good, everything honorable that Silas had tried to instill in his company from its very inception. She was the one who genuinely valued the company's ethos over personal gain, the one who saw people, not just numbers on a spreadsheet. His succession plan, once so clear, now lay shattered, replaced by a painful clarity. A new path, one he had never imagined, began to form in his mind, audacious and necessary. The moment for the reveal was approaching, and it would be a reckoning, a dramatic turning of the tables. The day of the final acquisition meeting dawned with a false promise of a new era, a deceptive calm before the storm. The grand boardroom of Blackwood Enterprises buzzed with a nervous energy, a palpable hum of anticipation, almost a vibration in the air. Marcus Thorne, resplendent in a custom-tailored suit, exuded an aura of triumphant confidence, his chest puffed out, his gaze unwavering. He moved with an almost arrogant swagger, his eyes constantly scanning the room, absorbing the deferential nods of the attending board members and legal counsel, basking in their unspoken admiration. Brianna Sterling, sharp and poised, sat beside him, her laptop open, presenting a flawless facade of professionalism, though a subtle, predatory gleam in her eyes betrayed her true sentiments, a hunger for power. This was their moment, the culmination of months of meticulous plotting, the final step in their elaborate scheme to seize control and liquidate Blackwood Enterprises for their colossal personal gain. A global conglomerate, Omnicorp, the supposed buyer, had their representatives present, their expressions carefully neutral, though an astute observer might have detected a hint of smugness, a quiet confidence in the deal's supposed inevitability. The air was thick with the scent of ambition, fear, and impending, irreversible change. As the meeting was called to order, Marcus cleared his throat, a theatrical gesture designed to command attention, to assert his newfound authority. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice echoing with self-importance in the opulent room, "today marks a pivotal moment for Blackwood Enterprises. After extensive negotiations, we are here to finalize the acquisition by Omnicorp, a move that will ensure he paused, searching for the right corporate platitude, a phrase to mask the true intent, a prosperous and modern future for all involved." He glanced at Brianna, who offered a small, approving nod, a silent signal of their shared triumph. Just then, a faint squeak of a mop bucket wheel announced an unwelcome presence. Elias Vance, the old janitor, shuffled into the room, his head down, clutching his mop and a cleaning rag, seemingly oblivious to the proceedings. He began, with his usual deliberate slowness, to wipe down the edge of the large, circular boardroom table, right behind Marcus's chair, an apparent accidental intrusion. A collective groan, barely audible but distinct, rippled through the room. Marcus's face flushed with irritation, then outright annoyance. "Elias!" Marcus hissed, his voice a low, furious whisper, barely controlled. "What in the blazes do you think you're doing? Get out. You're not supposed to be in here right now. This is a private, high-level meeting." He shot a withering look at the head of security, who frantically gestured for Elias to leave, a desperate attempt to rectify the perceived blunder. Elias, however, did not move. He straightened, slowly, deliberately, his back unbending with a surprising stiffness that belied his apparent age. He set the mop against the table with a soft thud, the sound oddly loud in the sudden quiet, and then, with a movement that was anything but frail, he reached into his worn uniform pocket. All eyes, now riveted by this unexpected defiance, watched as he pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden box, smooth and dark with age, clearly an object of value. Marcus stared, utterly baffled, his anger momentarily forgotten, replaced by sheer bewilderment. "What is that, a lunchbox?" "Elias, if you don't leave this instant, I'll have you fired, personally. You'll never work in this city again." Elias ignored him, his gaze fixed on the box. He opened it, revealing a gleaming, gold-plated pen, a Parker Duofold, a rare and exquisite model known for its timeless elegance and exorbitant price, a true collector's item. He placed it carefully on the table, the metallic click echoing in the tense silence. Then, from another pocket, he produced a pair of spectacles, not the cheap, drugstore variety he usually wore, but a sophisticated, wire-rimmed pair crafted from a precious alloy that spoke of immense quality and personal expense. He put them on, and as his gaze swept over the room, the transformation was almost unsettling. The cloudy, distant look that had characterized his eyes as Elias was replaced by a sharp, intelligent glint, a piercing intensity that seemed to penetrate through the very souls of those he observed, laying them bare. "Marcus," Elias said, his voice no longer raspy and subservient, but clear, resonant, and undeniably powerful, a voice that commanded respect, not begged for it, filling the room with its authority. I believe I warned you earlier. The game is indeed over. But not in the way you had hoped, not in the triumphant manner you envisioned. He looked directly at Marcus, his eyes unwavering, then at Brianna, their faces now a mixture of profound confusion and growing alarm, their carefully constructed facades beginning to crack. You speak of a prosperous future, Marcus, but your version of prosperity involves the systematic destruction of everything I've built. You speak of modernization, but your definition involves the callous disregard for loyalty and the wholesale abandonment of those who dedicated their lives to this company, to my vision. Marcus scoffed, a nervous, almost hysterical laugh escaping him, his bravado rapidly crumbling. Elias, you're losing your mind. Get out of here before I call for security. You're disrupting a multi-billion-dollar deal. You'll be arrested, he sputtered, fear beginning to seep into his voice. Oh, I'm not disrupting anything, Marcus, Elias replied, a wry, knowing smile playing on his lips, a look of profound understanding in his eyes. He picked up the expensive pen and twirled it between his fingers, a gesture of quiet confidence. I'm merely ensuring that the right deal is made. And that the right person makes it. He turned to the Omnicorp representatives, who were now exchanging bewildered glances, their careful neutrality dissolving into open confusion. Gentlemen, he stated, his voice now formal, authoritative, carrying the weight of decades of leadership, I apologize for the theatrics, but it was necessary to unmask the truth. I am Silas Blackwood. The words hung in the air, a thunderclap in the pristine silence of the boardroom, a seismic shock. Marcus and Brianna's faces drained of all color, their jaws slack with utter disbelief, their world collapsing in an instant. The Omnicorp representatives leaned forward, their expressions shifting from confusion to dawning recognition, a sudden, cold realization of the true identity of the man before them. Silas Blackwood? Marcus stammered, his voice barely a whisper, a strangled sound of utter shock. But you're Elias. The janitor. It's impossible. Silas Blackwood, no longer Elias Vance, stood tall, his posture now radiating the undeniable authority of a man who had commanded empires for decades, every ounce of his true self reasserted. Indeed, Marcus. For the past 6 months, I have been Elias Vance. A janitor. A fly on the wall, observing the true character of those I entrusted with my legacy, with my life's work. His gaze hardened as it fell upon his grandnephew and Brianna, filled with a deep, sorrowful condemnation. And what I observed, Marcus, was a profound disappointment. I saw greed. I saw betrayal. I saw a complete disregard for the very people who built this company alongside me, who believed in its values. Just then, a side door opened, and a distinguished-looking man in a sharp, impeccably tailored suit, carrying a heavy leather briefcase, entered. He was Mr. Harrison, Silas Blackwood's longtime personal attorney, a man known throughout the legal world for his discretion, his unwavering loyalty, and his formidable legal prowess. He nodded gravely at Silas, a gesture of silent acknowledgement, then turned to the stunned, silent room, his presence reinforcing the gravity of the moment. Good morning, everyone, Mr. Harrison stated, his voice calm but firm, cutting through the thick tension. As Mr. Blackwood has just revealed, he has been conducting an internal audit of the company's operations and, more importantly, its leadership. And based on his findings, the proposed acquisition by Omnicorp, as negotiated by Mr. Thorne and Ms. Sterling, is hereby null and void, effective immediately. Chaos erupted. Marcus sprang to his feet, his face contorted in a mask of fury and desperate, crumbling hope. This is insane. You can't do this, Uncle. This deal is legally binding. We had everything in place. His voice was a raw shriek of disbelief. Silas merely raised a hand, a simple, decisive gesture that instantly silenced him. On the contrary, Marcus. I can. And I have. For you see, during my time as Elias Vance, I uncovered numerous irregularities in your negotiations, Marcus and Brianna's. Insider trading. Embezzlement. Manipulation of company assets for personal gain. Conspiracy to defraud the company and its shareholders. All meticulously documented, every detail recorded. All presented to the authorities this very morning, with irrefutable proof. His words struck Marcus and Brianna like physical blows, each accusation a hammer to their carefully constructed world. Brianna, who had remained silent until now, her composure a shield, gasped, her carefully constructed facade finally shattering, replaced by pure terror. Her eyes, usually so calculating, were wide with a dawning, horrifying realization. The Omnicorp representatives exchanged urgent, panicked whispers, their faces now etched with concern and profound embarrassment, realizing they had been involved, albeit unknowingly, in a fraudulent scheme orchestrated by Marcus and Brianna, not the legitimate Silas Blackwood. Their own reputations were now at risk. Silas Blackwood looked at his grandnephew, his eyes filled with a deep sorrow that transcended anger, a profound regret for what could have been. You coveted my empire, Marcus. You wanted the power, the wealth, but you never understood what truly made it an empire: integrity, loyalty, and a commitment to people, not just profits. You chose greed. And now, you will pay the price, a price far greater than any financial gain. He gestured to Mr. Harrison, who calmly opened his briefcase, revealing a stack of legal documents and, as if on cue, a small, discreet group of uniformed officers entering the room, their presence a chilling finality. The game was indeed over, and the masks had finally fallen, revealing the true faces of betrayal and justice. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic, a corporate earthquake that sent shockwaves through the entire industry, reverberating for weeks. Marcus Thorne, once the golden boy of Blackwood Enterprises, the presumed heir, collapsed into his chair, his face ashen, the color of a man whose world had just imploded into dust. Brianna Sterling, usually so collected and cunning, could only stare blankly at the legal documents Mr. Harrison laid before her, her carefully constructed empire of deceit crumbling around her, reduced to rubble. The officers, dispatched with quiet efficiency, calmly informed Marcus and Brianna of the charges against them. Fraud, insider trading, corporate malfeasance. The list was long and damning, each accusation backed by Silas's meticulous observations and the irrefutable evidence he had gathered during his time as Elias Vance. Marcus raged, he pleaded, he even tried to invoke his family connection to Silas, his voice hoarse with desperation, but his words fell on deaf ears, devoid of any shred of sincerity. Silas, standing tall and unyielding, watched his grandnephew being escorted out of the boardroom, his reputation, his future, and his freedom utterly destroyed, a legacy squandered. Brianna, though less outwardly emotional, was equally broken, her carefully controlled facade unable to hide the profound devastation. Her carefully amassed wealth, her carefully cultivated career, evaporated in an instant. The whispers of the financial world would forever brand them as disgraced, their names synonymous with corporate betrayal. Their assets would be frozen, their ill-gotten gains seized, and their once promising careers reduced to ashes. The irony was not lost on Silas. They had sought to strip others of their livelihoods for personal gain, and now, they stood stripped of everything themselves, a harsh but just poetic justice. Amidst the chaos and the grim procession of justice, a single, unassuming figure remained, bewildered and silently watching from the edge of the room. Lena Petrov. She had witnessed the entire, astonishing reveal, her mind struggling to reconcile the kindly old janitor who had helped her with a shredder with the formidable CEO who now stood before her, radiating immense power. When Marcus and Brianna were finally gone, their shame echoing in the suddenly quiet room, and the Omnicorp representatives had hurriedly departed, embarrassed and chastened by their unwitting involvement, Silas turned to her, a gentle smile gracing his lips. Lena, still somewhat stunned, offered a small, hesitant curtsy, her usual poise momentarily lost. Mr. Blackwood, I don't know what to say. This is astounding. Silas smiled, a genuine, warm smile that had been absent during his time as Elias, a smile of profound relief and quiet joy. "Lena," he said, his voice gentle, devoid of his earlier authority, filled instead with warmth. "You don't need to say anything. Your actions have spoken volumes, clearer than any words." He walked over to her, extending a hand, his touch firm and steady. "During my time here, unseen and unheard, I saw many things. Much ugliness, much greed. But I also saw kindness. Integrity. A genuine care for this company and its people, a rare quality in this cutthroat world. That, Lena, I saw in you, shining brightly." Lena's eyes widened, her heart pounding in her chest. She remembered the small acts of kindness, the whispered words of concern for the company's employees, the moments she had been simply herself. Had he truly noticed every single one? "You were never dismissive," Silas continued, his gaze unwavering, full of admiration. "You were always respectful, always polite, even when others ignored me. You helped an old man with a jammed shredder, even when you were clearly exhausted and had your own tasks. You lamented the fate of your colleagues, not your own, showing a rare depth of empathy. Those are the qualities upon which Blackwood Enterprises was built, the values that fueled its growth, and the qualities it needs to survive and thrive into the future." He paused, then gestured around the now quiet, strangely empty boardroom, a space once filled with avarice, now ready for renewal. "This company, Lena, is not merely a collection of assets or a balance sheet. It is a legacy. And it needs a leader who understands that deeply, who embodies those values." He then made an offer that would forever change Lena's life, an offer she could never have dreamed of in her wildest imaginings, a testament to true character. "Lena Petrov," Silas announced, his voice carrying the weight of his profound conviction, "I am offering you the position of Chief Operating Officer of Blackwood Enterprises. You will work directly with me, closely by my side, and together, we will rebuild this company, instill its true values, and ensure its future is one of integrity and growth. Furthermore," he added, a twinkle in his eye, a gesture of profound gratitude, "as a token of my profound gratitude for your unwavering integrity, and as a foundation for your new life, I will transfer a substantial sum into a trust for you, enough to secure your financial future beyond your wildest dreams, and ensure you can pursue any educational or personal endeavors you wish, without financial burden, free from the worries that plague so many." Lena gasped, tears welling in her eyes, blurring her vision. "Coup. A vast sum of money, a lifetime of financial security?" She looked at Silas, then around the magnificent boardroom, then back at him, her mind struggling to process the enormity of his words, the sheer generosity of his offer. It was an overwhelming flood of relief, gratitude, and disbelief that brought her to her knees. She had simply been herself, kind and compassionate, never expecting a reward beyond the satisfaction of a job well done, of staying true to her own principles. "Mr. Blackwood," she choked out, tears now streaming down her face, her voice thick with emotion, I don't know what to say. I'm honored. And so incredibly grateful. This is everything." She couldn't form a coherent sentence, her heart overflowing. Her kindness had been an investment, not in money, but in character, and the returns were now immeasurable, beyond any calculation. Months later, Blackwood Enterprises hummed with a renewed sense of purpose, a vibrant energy replacing the stagnant air of greed. The toxic atmosphere that had pervaded the executive floors had entirely dissipated, replaced by a quiet professionalism and a palpable sense of hope, a shared commitment to a better future. Silas Blackwood, though still the guiding force, had largely receded from the daily grind, now a mentor more than a manager, offering wisdom and support from the background. He often watched Lena Petrov, vibrant and determined, navigate the corporate landscape with a blend of shrewd intelligence and an unwavering moral compass, embodying the values he cherished. She championed employee welfare, initiated programs that fostered a strong sense of community and mutual respect, and systematically dismantled the cynical, profit at all costs mentality that Marcus and Brianna had tried to impose. The company was not just recovering, it was thriving, built on a foundation of trust, respect, and shared purpose, stronger and more resilient than ever before. Silas, from his revitalized corner office, overlooking the bustling city, felt a profound sense of peace settle over him, a quiet contentment he hadn't known in years. He had saved his life's work from becoming a hollow shell, a monument to greed, and in doing so, he had found a truly worthy successor in the most unexpected of places, a person whose integrity was her greatest asset. Lena, blooming in her new role, her leadership blossoming, was a living testament to the power of authentic character. She had used her newfound resources not for ostentatious displays of wealth, not for personal indulgence, but to support her family, invest in community projects, and further her education, becoming an even more formidable and compassionate leader, her wisdom growing with her influence. He often thought of the poignant irony: his grandnephew, groomed for power, educated in the finest institutions, had fallen because of his blindness to true value, his inability to see beyond personal gain. Meanwhile, a humble junior analyst, overlooked and dismissed by the very people who sought to destroy the company, had risen to prominence purely on the strength of her integrity, her quiet acts of kindness. It was a powerful, enduring lesson that would resonate for generations. For character, like gold, reveals its true luster not in the artificial glare of prosperity, but in the crucible of adversity, when all else is stripped away. It is in the shadowed corners, in the seemingly insignificant interactions, in the quiet moments of choice, that a person's true worth is laid bare. And in a world often consumed by superficiality and self-interest, the quiet acts of kindness, the unwavering commitment to what is right, will always, always find their just and profound reward. Goodness, like a seed planted in fertile ground, nurtured by quiet acts of integrity, will inevitably blossom, yielding a harvest beyond measure, enriching not just the individual, but all those it touches. If you found Silas's story of uncovering greed and rewarding true kindness as captivating as we did, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another incredible tale. We have many more stories of justice, disguise, and unexpected twists coming your way. Now, we want to hear from you. What was the most surprising moment in Silas's reveal? Have you ever witnessed someone's true character emerge in an unexpected situation, for better or worse? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below.